recording now.
I think it started.
Alright, cool. So this is the Tom and Mike show, and this is the first trial run. I'm really glad that you captured the cracking open of the beer, because that provides some much needed context.
Yeah, it's too bad we don't have the video on.
Well, maybe we'll add video next time.
Yeah, I'm going to set up my nice camera on the tripod.
So before we get started, can you close this thing that has nothing to do with Preact? Sweet. And what's the premise of the show?
Well, I guess we're just going to do tutorials and kind of see where it goes.
Well, what's the premise of the show, though?
The premise?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Alright, I'll spoil it for you. It's Tom and Mike going through getting started tutorials.
Oh, right.
And, okay, cool. So today we're going to be doing Preact.
Just this one?
Yeah. And neither Mike nor I have ever touched Preact ever before, although I think we've both messed around with React. I haven't really done too much in ES6. I don't think Mike has either. So this is pretty much just from scratch. A friend of ours told us to do stuff inside of Code Sandbox. So maybe we'll try. Maybe we'll try to do this tutorial in Code Sandbox. How does that sound?
Okay.
Is that what you wanted?
That works.
Okay, cool. All right, let's go back to the getting started tutorial.
Sweet. All right, and then we're gonna just close this out.
Yeah, we fucked that up.
All right.
So you got nice and baked before this, huh?
Always.
Fair enough.
Always.
Okay. I don't know what you're gonna type because we haven't even looked at this tutorial yet. Cool. All right. So we have those lines, so that's good. What I wanted to see is like, okay, so we wrote all of this, and then how do we know that we're loading Preact? But maybe there's like in code pen. Can you go to settings real quick?
The hello world.
JavaScript. Okay, yeah, that's what I was looking for. So those are the external resources. So we have Preact. Okay, that's all I needed to know. Do you understand what's going on there?
Yes.
Okay, cool. What's going on there?
All the dependency injection?
Close enough.
Yeah.
All right, let's go back. Okay, cool. So we can skip this.
Okay.
Okay, so let's do this part. All right, I'm gonna read and you read along and try not to zone out. Motherfucker. Out of the box, Preact provides an H function that returns your JSX, that turns your JSX into virtual DOM elements. That's essentially exactly how React works. It also provides a render function that creates a DOM tree from the virtual DOM. Once again, exactly how React works. To render some JSX, just import those two functions and use them like so. Okay. I don't want you to copy any of this fucking code. I want you to handwrite it. Nope, that should be it.
I'm working backwards.
Okay, so take a wild guess what that second argument to render is.
The context?
Context has a very specific meaning. What do you mean by context?
Oh, I don't know, like a bind context or something.
No, not at all. Good guess, though. I mean, I'm not going to talk too much shit about the guess, because what you're saying is actually a thing. It's the element where the virtual DOM that you just wrote is going to get injected into. So document.body is an element, right? If you don't give that an element, then how the hell it doesn't know where to inject the markup that the virtual DOM generates?
Oh, this is like the app div?
Sure.
That it injects it, okay.
Yeah, so we got a duplicate declaration H. So I'm assuming that I believe let H render component equals Preact is all just redundant with import. It means the same thing, it's just a slightly different way of importing. So we just remove one of them, or comment one of them out, yeah. Alright, cool. Click that shit. In upper left.
Oh, is it working?
Partial credit for that. Components. Preact exports a generic component class which can be extended to build encapsulated, self-updating pieces of a user interface. Extends a generic component class which can be okay. Components support all the standard React lifecycle methods like should component update and component will receive props. Providing specific implementations of these methods is the preferred mechanism for controlling when and how components update. Okay, that's worth repeating. Should component update and component will receive props are also in the React API, and they're just examples of different lifecycle methods. Oh, that's not what I meant to repeat. I meant to repeat. Providing specific implementations of these methods is the preferred mechanism for controlling when and how components update. Okay, that's interesting because I spent a lot of time writing React without really ever having to do should component update or component will receive props. The only times I really had to use those things were when, for some reason or other, I decided to take it into my own power when when I knew that the DOM needed to be updated because of the way I was doing things. In some cases, it didn't actually need to be updated, even though the data changed. I know that's all kind of abstract, but that's interesting that they're calling this out in a getting started tutorial because in my experience with a couple thousand line project, which is actually pretty small, I didn't really need to worry about it too much. Components also have a render method, but unlike React, this method is passed props state as arguments. Okay. This provides an ergonomic means to destructure props and state into local variables to be referenced from JSX. Okay, if that's all it's for then. And that's cool. Hey, let's take a look at a very simple clock component which shows the current time. Alright, you got some typing to do. Or just delete it, because we don't need it anymore. Sweet. Okay. And now we're just rendering an instance of clock, and second argument is document body, just like before, but this time we made it a class instead. Sweet. Look, it's already working.
Yay!
Yeah, what time is it?
1:20. 13:20.
Sweet. Now, I think that we have a problem here. And I think that this is where the tutorial is going to go. It just rendered the time once. And that was the time at which we called render. But it's no longer that time.
The component lifecycle?
Yeah. So this is where we're going next. In order to have the clock's time update every second, we need to know when clock gets mounted to the DOM. If you've used HTML5 custom elements, admittedly I haven't, this is similar to the attached callback and detached callback lifecycle methods. Preact invokes the following lifecycle methods if they are defined for a component. Okay, so we have component will mount, and
I've used bunch of
yeah. Before the component gets mounted, component did mount after. So it's both. It's a bunch of before and afters. Will unmount, will receive prop, should component update. I think should component update is a workhorse from what I recall. Component will update, component did update, before, after, etc., etc. What's interesting to me is all of these. Hey, wait. All of these, the last three that kind of huddle around render. Why is it update? Why isn't it called should component render? Component will render. Maybe it's because what I'm thinking is maybe update doesn't always result in a render. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, renders its own fucking...
Okay. But still, I don't know, maybe I'll have to answer that for myself later. Alright.
Yeah.
So we want to have a, you can burp. So we want to have a 1 second timer start once the component gets added to the DOM. I agree. And stop if it is removed. We'll create the timer and store a reference to it in component did mount and stop the timer in component will unmount. I don't really care about stopping the timer. That's interesting that they want us to do that. I guess probably just for housekeeping is good form, but like that clock instance, who cares? Each timer tick will update the component's state object with a new time value. Doing this will automatically re-render the component. That's pretty cool. All right.
Gotta type all this.
Yep.
It's working.
Yeah, yeah. It's already working, but there's a catch here.
Okay.
The reason it's working is because in your component, scroll up a little bit. In component did mount, you create this timer, and it runs every 1,000 milliseconds, and every time it creates a new date now. When you call this .setState, it updates the internal state, and that triggers a re-render.
Yeah.
Right? So behind the scenes, it is doing a DOM diff and saying a virtual DOM diff and saying, oh, okay, well, I know the output changed, and the reason the output changed is because you triggered a render, but that state that you're setting isn't actually what's being rendered. It's essentially the exact same thing, but all you're doing is kind of just kicking it and saying, hey, re-render, re-render, re-render. Your actual state that you're setting isn't getting piped through and displayed. What is getting piped through and displayed, if you scroll down, is this new date to locale time string that you're creating on every render. So if you go back to the tutorial, what it actually wants you to do is new date state.time. And that's the major difference there. Even though it's going to be the exact same value.
Oh, interesting. So
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It started working before I was even done typing. How did you notice that? Oh, you just saw that it doesn't do that?
I don't see code line by line. I see the big picture.
Yeah, that's good. All right.
Nope. Oh, sorry. No, yeah, you're right. Good call. Rad. Aren't clocks cool?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Let's go back to the. Wait, do you have any questions?
Now we have a ticking clock. No, I guess. Let's see. Yeah, this is some of the things I did when I first started with React. Is component mounts, changing shit. Sweet.
Do you have any thoughts about this tutorial? I think right now would be a good time to just chat about any unknowns or interesting approaches or pretty much anything that is worth talking about that we didn't cover while going through it.
I like this one. It was nice and short, and everything I typed worked. So, although I didn't really pay too much attention to this beginning part here.
Yeah, that's the warts. We just ignored the warts and went to town.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I have a couple things I wanted to talk about. Can you go back to the other window? Sweet. So what I thought was pretty interesting is that we actually did use component did mount, and we have state within the component itself driving the render updates. If this clock widget were in a larger application, then that state would probably be being passed down from I think it's called a higher order component, and that higher order component might be tied into a data store somewhere else. So the actual clock state might not even belong to the component itself. You could still call set state because there's a concept of local state, but really that local state is kind of just a projection of the authoritative state that exists somewhere else. If you imagine in a more complicated application where you have maybe even dozens or 100 or more components, they can't all own their own state, because if you need these components to work together in any way, shape, or form, like you have maybe a component that controls panels and is responsible for rendering other components, it might need to know state about these sub things, like their ordering, and a sub thing inside of that panel might need to know its order, right? But it's dirty to copy that. I'm gonna have to loop back around and correct myself, but it's dirty for these things to know these things and be responsible for maintaining their own copies of that state. In other words, if that component knows that its its order inside of the panel is 3, and then the panel itself knows that everything that component's order is 3, and they both have copies of 3, and there's no authoritative owner of that thing, then they both have to update each other, and it's a circular dependency if there's different means of reordering state, like a drag and drop or an automatic sort button, right? So the answer to that is outside the scope of this tutorial, but the answer to that is having that state persisted in one single place and the data being passed down in one direction through the components. And that's a whole other giant topic. But yeah, that's just pretty much an example why a component owning its own state and not receiving it through, I think some people do props, some people do other means, but yeah, so that's pretty cool. All right, so I think that's pretty much the end of the first trial.
Yeah, I think for the next one, I want to do something like Redux or one of those other libraries that you've seen all over the place.
Yeah.
In the React code bases, or something like Vue. Anyway.
That'd be pretty cool. So maybe next time we do React itself, or Flux, or Redux, pretty much anything.
Mm-hmm.
And don't forget to hit like and subscribe.
Yeah.
And vote on what you want to see next, and we'll put that on the list.
Tell us in the comments.
Yeah.
All right, bye.